Hello and welcome to another episode of the Ringer NFL show. Sheil is off recording the Philly special after the Washington-Philadelphia game. The Eagles beat the Commanders on Thursday Night Football, but I have Diante Lee here with me. I'm Stephen Ruiz, and we're going to talk about the game. Now, Diante, this was an interesting game. It wasn't the most exhilarating game, but I think it was interesting with the result. What was your first major takeaway? Was it on Washington or was it on the Eagles side of the ball?
I would say, honestly, the point I was going to make is probably intertwined, which is that Philadelphia's defense, I came away feeling like Philadelphia's defense is legitimately good. And B, I think that we are now kind of faced with some of the regression that typically happens with the Cliff Kingsbury offense in the second half of the year. And I think a lot of the reasons why that occurs with this offensive scheme was on display tonight.
Yeah, I feel like both of these teams, these offenses in particular, are very unique in kind of similar ways, but not completely similar ways. And I think the difference you saw today was Philly's ecosystem on offense is kind of built around talent. They have the better offensive line. They have maybe the most dynamic running back in the NFL. They have maybe the most dynamic receiving duo in the NFL. And then they have Jalen Hurts, who I don't think is like maybe a top 5, top 10 quarterback, but I think a above average quarterback that can get the most out of this offense. And we saw them just kind of lean on Washington over and over and over again. And then the dam eventually breaks in the second half and Washington didn't have an answer. How concerned should we be about this Washington offense? I know I've voiced my concern about the longevity of the offense. I know you've had those same concerns. What did you see tonight, and what was it about this Eagles defense that really gave Washington problems, and how their offense is constructed? How did it kind of attack that?
So it's interesting to see the way they struggled tonight in comparison to what it looked like against Pittsburgh, because it's two different defensive approaches, right? Pittsburgh wants to play a lot of tight coverage, really challenge your receivers to separate early and late in the route. And they're going to use a 4-man rush or maybe like a 5-man type of fire zone and rely on a lot of man coverage to try to break up the timing of your offense. And that was one thing that we have kind of flagged early in the year that Jaden Daniels needed to continue to work against. And I think that the results were really hot at the beginning of the year. And I think that we've seen basically since that Bears game, some of the productivity against tight coverage start to pare down week over week. This week, though, or at least in this game, what we saw was more of what Big Fangio does best, right? Which is say, hey, if you want to take the dump offs, the check downs, the screens, the quick flare outs in the RPO game and think that you're going to beat us with that 10 to 12, 15 times, then you're just going to have to prove it to me. Right. Yeah. And I think that was the challenge for this offense was that Quinyon Mitchell played really well, taking away the perimeter for them. And I think that you felt that very early in the game, not just from the sense of whether or not Terry McLaurin was making plays, but just how much more condensed the field gets when Washington does not have that vertical push element. And then because of that, now you have Jaden Daniels holding the ball. And I think we saw some of the things that can be a problem for him in the pocket, even though he has been pretty dynamic at avoiding sacks and being able to use his legs as a weapon within this offense when things were clearly knocked out of rhythm and he didn't have something easy in the seams or something easy outside the numbers that he could go attack. You really kind of started to see him press. And I thought that Philadelphia did a really good job of being disciplined in their rush lanes without having to blitz a ton, and kind of bothered him and kept him from getting out to his right-hand side.
Yeah, and Philly's defensive line in this game, Jalen Carter in particular, I feel like he was one of the differences. And I think you saw the difference between an offense that's gotten by on kind of smoke and mirrors to a certain degree in Washington and a very delicate ecosystem. I know we've talked about this on the pod earlier where they've tried to avoid obvious passing situations at all costs. Like on first down, they're spamming RPOs because they want to get those 4 or 5 yards. So on second down, it's a little bit easier and they can get into third and short and fourth and short. And they've been money on those downs too, on those short yardage downs. And tonight we kind of saw the Eagles win that. We saw the defensive line, the talent of Philadelphia kind of win out against Washington's, I would say, lack of talent. They've been working around the talent. I think they've been better than we all expected, but I think the scheme has done a lot of the heavy lifting. Now, my concern is, what is this going to look like now that teams have tape on what they're doing and how they're going to approach things and what they're doing with no huddle and how to match up against that? And the results so far haven't been great. Do you think this is more of I'm assuming you're concerned with it. Are you concerned going forward with this team? And what is the depth of your concern?
I am concerned, like I said, because this wasn't just a copy paste effort from Philadelphia with what Pittsburgh did this past Sunday. Now you're seeing, okay, there are ways that you can play more zone shells and still fluster this offense and still be able to win up front. I think that some of the points that you've been making about how they've been able to work around having not the best offensive line is really starting to they're really starting to see a light be shown on all the ways that this offensive line can cause problems for this offense in the run game, in the quick passing game. Obviously, you have the disaster that was that late fourth down where guys are running into each other because they clearly had a miscommunication on what the call was before Jaden Daniels basically runs himself out of bounds being tackled by Zach Bond. But even before that, right, you got to see so often just Philadelphia basically load up the line of scrimmage, get into those solid 6-1 looks that Vic Fangio likes to run against more of your zone-based offenses, or when he doesn't want you to run counter or some of those other runs that you would maybe try against the odd front that he would play in. And I think the fact that they were so easily able to get that, and there was no answer because Jalen Carter couldn't be blocked one-on-one. Jordan Davis, I thought, did a pretty good job when he was in the game as well. And then I think maybe the biggest thing that I came away from that game with was just how unblockable Brandon Graham was.
Yeah. Both
in the run game and as a secondary kind of effort rusher tonight. And if you're going to have these matchup issues at 2-3 positions up front with your offensive line, when you want to be a spread passing team and an RPO team and try to keep your quarterback out of these obvious passing situations, if things are not perfectly manicured the way they were for the first 6 to 8 weeks of the season, they're going to have a lot of trouble, I think, being explosive the way that we saw them be when everything looked great for this offense. So I am concerned. I'm not sure what your level of concern is for it, but I think that now I need to see them flash some of that dominance again before they get me back in.
Yeah, I don't think they had the high ceiling maybe I thought they had a couple weeks ago. I thought the offense would kind of fall off. I didn't know. Well, we don't know now. It's been 2 weeks. They've kind of struggled. Maybe they'll bounce back, but the concern is Cliff. But even tonight, you kind of saw the Brandon Graham play. I think there was an RPO with Jaden Daniels. He had an option to run the ball or flip a screen out to the perimeter, and Brandon Graham just collapses the blocking scheme and tackles him for a loss. And I thought that was a recurring theme. The look was there, the numbers were there, and Philadelphia still won. And I think that's going to be a problem the more talented teams Washington comes across. You play Cincinnati, you're going to be able to run your RPOs. And if you have the same number of blockers that they have defenders in the run box, you're probably going to win that play.
You're going to win.
Against a team like Philadelphia, though, and against a coach like Vic Fangio, who is used to kind of gaming up the numbers and playing the numbers game, I think that's the worst type of matchup for this offense, because it's so based on a numbers count before the snap, especially on first down, and the foundation of the offense. They have to get those good gains on first down. I bet Vic Fangio must have felt like it was 2020 all over again going up against a Cliff Kingsbury offense. It's this is when my offense or my defense was the talk of the town. This is the type of offense that we would go up against and we could stop. So I do think it showed some of the limitations there. Now, I wanted to talk about Philadelphia because I think they were the more impressive team. I mean, I'm coming away from this game, even with Jalen Hurts not playing his best game. I thought he missed a lot of throws early on. I thought we saw some of that skittishness in the pocket. I did think he played a little bit better in the second half, and it was more decisive getting outside the pocket. But it didn't matter. It really didn't matter. We talked about how good this defense looks already and how they can play man coverage and how I think they can match up well with a lot of teams. But this offense, with that offensive line and that run game and Saquon Barkley, and then you have those two guys, those two deterrents on the outside in Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. I know they didn't connect on anything deep tonight, but they usually do. I mean, am I crazy for thinking they can go on a 2022 run?
I would say you're not crazy. I think that maybe the biggest surprise is just that it's not going to look like 2022, right? The 2022 offense was a lot of Jalen Hurts creating with his legs in the design run game. And I think that the scrambling has maybe improved week by week, even if the pocket management has been getting worse and some of the designed run game. I think it's been kind of up and down. I think over the last 2 weeks, you've kind of seen him put his foot in the ground and get more north and south in a way that's been encouraging. I don't think that we see the same kind of elusiveness or willingness, I think, to be in traffic and take potential, hits that he doesn't see coming and can't protect himself from. And I guess I understand the thought process behind maybe his play style changing over the coming year or over these years. But I think for me, looking at them potentially having another run like they did in 2022 or the back half of 2021 when they snuck into the wild card round, I think for me, the thing that's been most impressive is how little they have to ask of Jalen Hurts. I thought that today and last week has just been like a perfect encapsulation of exactly the handful of plays they need their quarterback to make in order for them to be playing winning football. In the first half, obviously no rhythm, couldn't connect. They had that third down to Jahan Dotson that got batted down where Jalen Hurts was late. It felt like every second and third down drop back they had, Jalen Hurts was scrambling around or trying to extend in the pocket, even if pressure had not yet moved him off his platform. So there was clearly some discomfort with how he was interpreting the rush lanes around him and the protection around him, which is interesting given that the offensive line was healthy. But I think they went into halftime, came out of it. And again, I think the modus of operation for them that's going to win them the most games is using Saquon Barkley as the function that gets this offense moving side to side because he can create out in space. And then from that, you're able to open up enough passing opportunities for them to move the ball. Obviously, the biggest play was probably that Dallas Goedert sail route where the ball got punched out and Grant Calcaterra jumped on it. But I think that play opened itself up in a way that Jalen Hurts was confident in delivering the ball because you had seen them really kind of pound the run game with Kenneth Gainwell and Saquon Barkley. So I think that as long as they're able to lean on that offensive line and run game, that means that you don't need 12 to 15 plays from Jalen Hurts. You probably just need 6 to 8. And if that's what they need, then the chances are that's going to be good enough for them to contend for maybe the 2 seed in the NFC.
Yeah, I definitely think that's probably their ceiling at this point. What do you think about Washington's ceiling? Just not even looking at the schedule, what do you think they finish? You think they're still in the playoffs comfortably, or do you think this is going to be a fight till the finish? I'm assuming that you're picking the Eagles to win this division after what you saw tonight.
At this stage, yes, even though they have to travel to Washington later in December, I do think that Washington ends up having a battle maybe a little bit harder for their playoff spot than I would have assumed when they were 7-1 or whatever the case may be a few weeks ago. And definitely after like the Hail Mary, where it just seemed like this team was in total team of destiny mode in the Chicago game. I do think that roster attrition is going to be an issue for them because they already didn't have a lot of top line talent. And I think that you're just seeing their lack of depth really be exposed, especially defensively. They have so few answers for an offense that's given them problems in the run game or between the tackles. They don't have a steady rotation or a steady diet of different pass rushers that they could throw at the problem in the way that you would typically associate with the Dan Quinn defense. And I think that a lot of those guys were already kind of playing above their head, right? Like Frankie Louvu has been an interesting player. I would say that this is some of the most consistent play I've seen from him defensively. I think this is one of the better versions of Jeremy Chin that we've seen. And he was a lot up and down coming out of Carolina. And I think that if there's any slippage on that side of the ball, the chances are that things will cave. And that was the thing that they need to try to be at maximum capacity at all times to try to protect their rookie quarterback from having to be a hero or having to be perfect, or Cliff Kingsbury having to dial up answers that we know that he has not demonstrated to have had in his career, in his coaching career. So right now, I would say that the ceiling is significantly lower. They're probably just a really solid wild card team. And maybe you're probably leaning on Jaden Daniels having 100-yard rushing game to upset a team more so than them being able to march the ball up and down the field the way they were in the first 2 months of the season. Yeah,
that's how I think I feel about this team after this. But if I'm a Washington fan, I'm ecstatic. Even after this loss, they lose 26-18 on the road to a team that's 8-2 now. You guys are in the thick of the playoff race. In Washington, even when they've made the playoffs over the last 2 decades, they haven't had seasons like this where they've been in the race from wire to wire. Like in 2020 when they lost to Brady in the playoffs, they kind of backed into the playoffs. 2012, even with RG3, they kind of had a rally down the stretch. I think they were like 3-5.
Yeah, they were bad to start that year.
Yeah, they were bad. Yeah. And even in 2005, the year that Sean Taylor was killed, and they had a rally with Joe Gibbs and win like their last 5 games to get in. So the last 3 times, it hasn't been like this. They haven't been a wire to wire playoff contender. So enjoy it, Washington. I think that week 16 game still has some meaning, the rematch in Washington against Philadelphia, but they lose this game and Philadelphia takes a 1.5 game lead in the division. They also have a game in hand, so they can extend that lead a little bit. That's going to do it for us. We're going to get to the full preview show with Sheil hosting, but before that, we're going to take a break.
It is the preview show where we go over the big storylines. Awesome. Week 11 slate. We've got 3 big games to talk about. Then we will go over our picks. Ruiz, this might be the best slate of the season I feel like we've had so far.
Yeah, definitely. We get these two like monster quarterback matchups, 4 quarterbacks from my top 5 in the rankings. And then the 5th quarterback that's not included in those matchups, Lamar Jackson, is playing one of the teams that have tormented him throughout his career. So it's really exciting for me, especially from that quarterback lens.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. Diante, I will admit that when I tweeted out my picks earlier, I did write week 12 picks first before having to erase and do week 11. So stuff does blend together this time of year, but I got it down. And yes, we don't want to fast forward through week 11.
Listen, as somebody who does the power rankings and for maybe like the last 3 to 4 weeks have said, all right, we've reached a halfway point. Now we've reached a halfway point. We're definitely in the back half now. I totally understand. There
you go. That's the NFL's fault, not ours. They go from, they switch the weeks, they switch the games. How are we supposed to know? All right, let's get started. One of the games of the year, this is one of those that if you are somebody who is forced to do content in like the spring when the schedule comes out, if you're forced to do or you like to read one of those best games of the year type posts, this game had to have made the list because it is the Kansas City Chiefs going to Buffalo to take on the Buffalo Bills, 2 of the best quarterbacks of the last, 5, 6, 8 years. I can't even remember when everyone came into the league, but they're at the peak of their powers individually. Now we can have a conversation about whether their teams are at the peak of their powers. But Ruiz, this is going to be an awesome matchup. There's about 400 directions we could go in. What has your interest in this one?
Yeah, this game has a lot of implications, but it's kind of weird from the Chiefs' perspective because it's not a game they necessarily need to win. They have a margin for error that they've built up. Their schedule after this game isn't the hardest to go. They play Carolina, they play Las Vegas, they play a Chargers team they've already beat. They play the Browns, they play a Texans team that's kind of imploding on itself. So I think they can afford to lose this one, but I don't think it's one they'll want to lose because I think they have to prove to themselves that they still have that juice. I don't know. Maybe they have that confidence because when you've won 2 Super Bowls in a row, maybe you don't have to prove to yourself that you still can beat a team like Buffalo, but they've had some problems against Buffalo in the regular season. And then Buffalo, on the other hand, this team doesn't have a margin for error. If they want to win home field advantage, they're going to have to win this game because up next they have they have a bye, and then they have San Francisco. They go on the road to the Rams, and then they go on the road to Detroit. So these next 3 games after this one, those are games that they could lose, and they're already down. I think it's a game and a half against from Kansas City in the AFC standings. If they lose this one, home field advantage is all but wrapped up, and the AFC playoffs are going through Arrowhead.
Yeah, that's wild when you look at it. Like that last thing you said, I didn't realize until this week, because if the Chiefs win this game, they're going to be 10-0 and the Bills would be 8-3 and the Ravens already have 3 losses and the Chiefs would have the tiebreak over both the Ravens and the Bills. So they would have to literally lose 4 games in their final 7 games. They have to go 3-4 down the stretch, which Patrick Mahomes has never done in his entire career, for the other teams to even have a chance. And that's if the other teams win out there. So it seems crazy to say, Diante, but we could be looking at a situation come Sunday night after only week 11, where Parcells used to tell us the season doesn't start until after Thanksgiving. Well, the Chiefs could have the number 1 seed locked up before Thanksgiving this season.
Well, and Stephen, I think, hit on an important point, which is motivations for Kansas City, because I think it's easy for us to look at the undefeated record and look at the schedule and the 1-score wins and just stamp the they know how to win tag on this team. And obviously, two Super Bowls in, undefeated in a run for your 3rd, or I guess 3 overall, and going for a 3-peat. You can definitely say we know how to win, but I do think for a team in this position, you want to know that you stamped your season against the best opponents with wins. And I think that for them, if they're able to get this win now, and like Steven said, get the tie breaks and be multiple games ahead of the next best teams in the AFC, now you do get to make a choice on whether or not you want to chase an undefeated regular season, or if you want to really start putting guys on a pitch count in preparation for January and February.
I don't think they're going to go for the undefeated season. I don't think they're going to sell out. I think we could see a situation. I don't remember what year it was, but Jim Caldwell's Colts, I think they were chasing an undefeated season. They decided to rest their starters at one point, and they ended up giving up on that undefeated season. I think when you're a team that has done it before, has gone to Super Bowls, has won Super Bowls, that type of accolade doesn't maybe appeal to you as much, especially when you have a 3-peat on the line, which is its own bit of history that no team has ever done. I don't think they're going to sell out for that. And if you think they can kind of like flip a switch over the second half of the season, that's based on the assumption that they've kind of been holding their cards close to their vest over the first half. And I don't know if that's true. I think we saw that definitely last year when they had Travis Kelce on a pitch count, but he hasn't really been on that pitch count this year so much. And then when you see how they're kind of using him and how he's performing on certain plays that he's performed well on in the past, like for instance, throws behind the line of scrimmage, like that used to be an easy source of yardage for Patrick Mahomes. He used to average around 6 yards per catch on those catches. Now it's down to 3. It's been cut in half this year. And yards after catch, he was averaging 9 yards per catch, or 9 yards after catch on those throws last year. It's down to 4.5. So that's been cut in half too. So I think you're starting to see some parts of his game age and not be there anymore. And I kind of like to use like Kelce as the barometer for this offense. It's almost like the Travis Kelce index. However healthy he looks is how healthy the offense looks. That's been the case over the last couple of years. And right now, I know he's stacking like box score numbers, but efficiency numbers are not where they've been in the past for him.
Let me ask you guys this, because we've had a lot of talk about the Chiefs, and the Chiefs aren't what the Chiefs are supposed to be, and they don't look like how I think personally want them to look, because we're all fans of watching Patrick Mahomes play a certain style of football. How is this any different than the conversations people had last year? I mean, probably if you look at the stats and the metrics, they're all probably very similar to all the conversations we were having last year, except the Chiefs had some losses last year because they were getting some unlucky turnover stuff. Their defense this year, I would argue, is performing better than their defense last year. They have a better chance this year to have home field advantage throughout than they did last year. They started figuring some stuff out, because when you were saying, like, I don't know if the Chiefs, I do feel like the Chiefs internally, like, and it's Mahomes' makeup really, they're chasing the version of themselves that they want to be. Like, I don't think they're like, we'll save some stuff or take our foot off the gas. Like, I remember there were times last year he was very frustrated with the way the offense was playing last year. But you look at it this year, and they're in much better shape to figure things out. And they're still, again, I said it on our last pod, they're still the team to beat in the AFC. Last year, Rashee Rice comes on. This year, they trade for DeAndre Hopkins, so they've got a little bit of a bump there, you would think. So Diante, is it just like, why are we having this conversation again? Or do you think there is a difference this year than last year?
I would say it's not much different, but I think that that's kind of the point, right? I don't want to forget or lose sight of the fact that Patrick Mahomes basically had to play perfect throughout the postseason for them to get to where they ultimately did. And I think that because Kansas City now has the air of inevitability that comes with being a multiple time champion, I think that gets mistaken for ease in the process. This is not that 2009 Colts team that Steven was mentioning. And obviously that 2009 team didn't win the Super Bowl. They lost to the Saints in the Super Bowl that year. But if you go and you look before they ultimately kind of folded, and I would say the same for that Patriots team, I mean, they were running teams off the field early in the season. And then it got tighter as just like the natural attrition of a regular season went on. For this team, it's just not the case. So I understand concerns in the exact same way that I understand if you're a Chiefs fan or if you're a fan of the NFL thinking, this has worked before. We've seen it work before. They don't have to be explosive. The defense has been stable from wire to wire this year as one of the NFL's, if not the NFL's best. And Patrick Mahomes is healthy. And as long as you have those factors working in your favor and the possibility of having home field advantage again, you should be feeling good if you're Kansas City because you have all the necessary elements to contend for another championship. I just think for me, when I look at Buffalo and I look at Baltimore, I think that those two teams and what they've been trying to build to compete with Kansas City is closer to actualized than it's been in prior years. And that to maybe why I'm a little bit more concerned for Kansas City's contention hopes. It has less to do with them and much more to do with the rest of the field maybe kind of starting to creep closer to them.
Yeah, that's what I would say. That would be my answer. I think the top of the AFC is a lot better. I think the Ravens are a little more sound with Derrick Henry in the fold. He's added an element to their offense they didn't have, and that it would have been helpful in that matchup against Kansas City in the AFC title game last year, having Derrick Henry out there. And then the slim margins that they won with in the playoffs, like Tyler Bass misses a field goal at the end of regulation that could have forced overtime. Zay Flowers has that fumble on the goal line that really flipped that game, and MVS has to convert on 3rd and 10 just to prevent Lamar from having another chance at winning that game after the Chiefs basically get shut down after the first 2 drives. So I think the playoffs were a little bit harder, and Rashee Rice's emergence was a big factor in why that offense returned to what it was. It wasn't like they struggled in the regular season. It wasn't like they continued to struggle in the postseason and still won with that formula. No, they went back to like their previous levels of efficiency for that stretch of games. And that is what won them the Super Bowl. I don't know if that's going to happen again this year. I don't know if there's going to be a receiver. Maybe it's Hopkins that kind of emerges as a favorite target of Patrick Mahomes. But at the same time, Kelsey was a big part of that postseason run, and he seems to be slowing down a little bit. And another answer I would have to your question, the difference between last year and this year is the fact that it's this year. And like we could have said, I think people have the same take on the Patriots during their dynastic run. Like, oh, don't be dumb and pick against them. They always win in the end. But if you picked against them 12 times out of the 18 seasons, you would have been right that they didn't win the Super Bowl. So I think if there was any year where the Chiefs dynasty was going to end and they weren't going to win a Super Bowl, there was going to be a gap in the dynasty at least. I think it's this year. And I say that kind of counting out Steve Spagnuolo, who I have the most respect for in the NFL among defensive coordinators.
Yeah, I mean, there's no denying that they're 7-0 in 1-score games, and we know Mahomes' record in those games are going to be better than most. It doesn't mean it's going to be flawless. I think you guys make a good point, specifically with Baltimore's offense and the Bills' offense. I mean, I was looking back at that Chiefs-Bills game last year. I'm glad you brought up that Tyler Bass missed field goal. I mean, that was a 98th percentile game from the Bills in terms of offensive success rate. There were like 9 games all season that a team played that was more efficient. Now, the one thing is they didn't have an explosive play in that game. Yep. So I'm interested to see like what this game looks like. If you remember that game, Chiefs ran the ball all over the Bills, 146 yards. They averaged over 6 yards per carry in that game. The Bills were just very efficient. It wasn't explosive. It was efficient. They didn't have a lot of drives. It kind of shrunk the game. They had a turnover on downs, and then they had a missed field goal. It's like, the margin for error is so slim. And if you're a Mahomes fan or a Chiefs fan, I'm contradicting like what that was more of a prompt to you guys than how I actually felt. But yeah, you can always make the argument, well, it's Mahomes, it's going to happen. And maybe you're right. But Ruiz, I like your point about the Patriots. I mean, they went 10 years without winning a Super Bowl. And that's the best, that's the greatest like dynasty we've seen this century. So this could be the year. It also could not be the year. And they might be sitting there in New Orleans. So
I made a huge mistake. I had been making fun of Diante for being the guy that's, when they put together the montage, he's going to be the guy saying, oh, they don't have a chance. And now I just joined them.
Yeah, you just got clipped there for that one as well. Listen, if the Bills win this game, now they're only 1 game behind the Chiefs for the 1 seed, and they hold the tiebreaker. And so if the Chiefs don't win all those 1-score games down the stretch, the Bills have a legit shot. Now, how much does it matter? Honestly, with these 2 quarterbacks, I think they can win in other venues. At the same time, not having to play in the wild card round is a big deal, if for nothing else. I mean, obviously you have a chance to lose there, but injuries, the reps, all those things. So there is a lot at stake there. It'll be fun to watch these 2 quarterbacks go at it here. All right. Let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about the next 2 games we've got on our slate. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. Next game, we go to Sunday night. The Cincinnati Bengals, my Cincinnati Bengals, go to Los Angeles to take on the Los Angeles Chargers. Bengals are 4-6. I will remind everyone, 1 game out of the 7 seed. They are still in this thing. But as we look at this game, again, it's about the quarterbacks. It's about Joe Burrow. It's about Justin Herbert. And we decided we got to have the conversation because we knew we were going to get into the conversation one way or another. Right. So why beat around the bush? Let's be direct. Kapadias historically do not have a good, history of communicating directly with one another. So we're trying to change things. This generation of Kapadias, we're just going to come out and have the conversation right away rather than let the emotions fester 2 weeks down the line. Everyone's yelling at each other, crying the way Kapadias normally do. We're going to change it up, here for the podcast. Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert? It's a very simple question. Going forward, plant your flag. Who do you want? You have your choice of either quarterback. Let's say you're a franchise, an expansion team, whatever. You get
Alexa,
your choice of either quarterback. Ruiz,
Okay.
I think we know who you're going to pick, but tell us who you're going to pick and why.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the quarterback who has the stronger arm. I'm going to go with the quarterback who has the better pocket presence, who can throw with pass rushers in his face, who doesn't turn into late career Ben Roethlisberger whenever he suffers a minor injury. I'm going to go with the quarterback who has a better career EPA per dropback. I'm going to go with the quarterback who has a higher yards per dropback average. I'm going to go with the quarterback who takes fewer sacks despite facing more pressure. I'm going to go with the quarterback who's protected the ball better and has turned it over less, even though he has 400 more dropbacks than the other quarterback. I'm going to go with the quarterback with more game-winning drives, more fourth-quarter comebacks, with a better EPA average during the playoffs, by the way. I'm going to go with Justin Herbert. I think he's clearly the better quarterback. And on top of all that I just said, he's 16 months younger than Joe Burrow. So, yeah, I'm going to take Justin Herbert.
Before I get into some of those numbers, because I take issue with some of those. Now, I wasn't sure which way you were going. Some of those those sound like the Joe Burrow numbers that I pulled here. Diante, who do you got, Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert going forward?
Oof, that's this one's actually much tougher for me than it is for Steven. I'm going with Herbert. I'm going with Herbert for a lot of the reasons that he named, right? If we're just going about like quality of quarterback play, and just some of the physical attributes that Justin Herbert has in comparison to Joe Burrow, it's kind of hard to measure Burrow up. I will say this gave me a lot of pause because this is probably the first time in Joe Burrow's career that I've watched him and thought, oh, that could legitimately be the MVP of the league. If it weren't for Lamar Jackson this year, if it weren't for Josh Allen this year, he is playing like a true MVP candidate. And this is one of the first times watching him that all of his production doesn't just feel like a byproduct of Jamar Chase. Now, obviously, a lot of that is still due to having a loaded wide receiver room between T. Higgins when he's healthy and having Jamar Chase out there. But I think that his navigation of the pocket this year has been good. I think that that's reflective of his health in a way that we haven't been able to see in prior years. I think that his arm looks better, which again, I think is probably tied to health as well. And then just how quickly he's working through progressions and how aggressive he's been when he's not pressured has been an improvement. I do think that what ultimately separates the two are some of the things that Steven laid out in terms of response to pressure, sack avoidance, and then you start talking about arm talent and those things. And then I, as much as I think it can be a little bit reductive, you do have to think about what it would look like if the two were able to swap positions. And if they did, I would feel just as strongly about Cincinnati with Joe Burrow than I would if Joe Burrow were in Los Angeles, even playing with Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to provide like a social clip of me ripping on Herbert here because I actually think it's it for me. And I know Ruiz is convinced one guy. This is more like a coin flip thing to me where I could change my mind week to week. I like both these guys. I think they're among the 5 or 6 best quarterbacks in the NFL, the 5 or 6 guys you would want for your franchise going forward. I do think there's more of a statistical case for Burrow than the one Ruiz gave there. I mean, I think the rookie season of Burrow is probably doing a lot of work with some of those numbers you mentioned. If you look at the last 3 seasons, Burrow, let me see. Burrow is 7th in success rate. Herbert is 18th. Burrow is 10th in EPA per pass play. Herbert is 15th. Some of the numbers this year, Joe Burrow is 6th when pressured this year. Justin Herbert is down the list. I got my numbers all over the place. 19th in EPA per pass play when pressured. Even if you just look at kind of the raw numbers this season, Joe Burrow's 5th in success rate, 4th in EPA per pass play. Justin Herbert is 27th in success rate and 20th in EPA per pass play this year. So it all depends on the framing. Like if you go a 3-year frame or a 4-year frame, Burrow hasn't beat in a lot of those. The sack stuff with Justin Herbert this year, he doesn't measure well in pressure to sack rate. He's been awesome with that in the past. So that stuff depends. I agree that Herbert's the more talented guy. I think he's got the more upside. He's got the stronger arm, and so he can do a lot of those things. I do like that you mentioned his EPA per play in the one playoff game he played in where his team blew one of the biggest leads in NFL history. So I think it's close. Like, yeah, I'm not like it's definitely Burrow. I have been a Burrow guy for a while. I think the stuff that he does, I think he's getting better. I think the stuff he does is repetitive. I reject the notion that he's had this loaded group of everybody around him. His offensive line has been mostly bad. T. Higgins has been in and out. out of the lineup this year. T. Higgins has been out of the lineup for the last 3 games, like a third of the season, and he still performed at a top 5 level. You see him do that. So I'll go with Burrow, but again, this isn't one of those where I'm like, you're crazy. I could be at Herbert 2 weeks from now. I could say that could be one of my takes on the Sunday night show that I changed my mind. You guys were right. It's Herbert. So that's kind of where I am.
Yeah, I think though, I do agree with Diante, and like this is the best version of Burrow. And I think the area where he's made up the most ground on Herbert, especially for me, is managing pressure in the pocket. This is like the best he's ever done with that by the numbers and just by watching the film. Like in the past, he's been commended for his pocket presence, which I think it's kind of hard to judge his pocket presence because he does move around the pocket well. But one thing he doesn't do is like escape pressure and then reset and then kind of, throw from the pocket again. He's kind of either or. He's kind of in there or out of there. And he usually makes a good decision, but his pressure to sack rate has been really high throughout his career coming into this year. He's been credited with a lot of sacks, or I guess like penalized for a lot of sacks, like based on charting numbers from PFF in the past. I do think he's made a lot of improvements there. I think the one area where he's definitely holds an advantage over him and has for his entire career is accuracy. I think he's the most accurate quarterback in the NFL. But I do think like accuracy is so hard to gauge because there's like accuracy and there's also like the range of your accuracy and how far you can throw. And I think the fact that Justin Herbert has more range on his throws almost makes him more accurate. Like he's able to complete a higher percentage of his passes, like especially downfield. It's almost like comparing like a Damian Lillard type 3-point shooter to like a JJ Redick. JJ Redick's probably the better shooter, just standing there and like shooting right on the line. But Damian Lillard can like make shots that I don't think JJ Redick could make. That's how I would compare them. But like when you like actually break down the individual skill set, I just don't find an area where Burrow holds a significant advantage over Herbert, and the other way around, I think like Herbert holds several significant advantages. Especially, we haven't even talked about him as an athlete and a runner. We've seen it this year. The Chargers have really leveraged that. We saw it against the Titans. They run him on the 4th and 1. It was like a quarterback sweep play that they used to run for Lamar Jackson. Greg Roman used to run for Lamar Jackson. He didn't have any problem creating a touchdown in that situation. I think that's another area where he gives you a huge advantage over Burrow.
Yeah, traits wise, he has the edge. I don't think there's any argument if you did like a checklist of like arm, athleticism, size, those things. I know like we're not supposed to talk about it. We're not allowed to talk about like accomplishments for quarterbacks, just like team success and those. It's gone too far the other way, by the way. Like you are allowed to talk about that. And Joe Burrow I feel like he's done more with less. He's played in more big games. Yeah, I mean, he's been to a Super Bowl. He's been to another AFC Championship game. Even last year, done more. Like, what are Justin? I don't think that Justin Herbert has like. And now I'm going to fall into you can yell at me for QB wins, but like the signature wins thing, it's like, I don't know, like he's played in one playoff game in 4 years. Joe Burrow went to like Buffalo, and won a playoff game and played awesome in that game. So I just think those individual moments, Joe Burrow, there's no doubt has had more of those than Justin Herbert.
Yeah. During his Super Bowl run, he had a worse like EPA average than Mark Sanchez during his AFC title runs. Like he wasn't like the defense played really well. Joe Burrow played, I would say, mediocre for his own standards. Okay,
but in those individual games, they're not there if he hadn't played well, prior to that.
I mean, they beat Derek Carr like on a goal line stand in the wild card game. Ryan Tannehill.
Listen, Herbert was going up against your boy Dougie P, and they couldn't even get out of that game.
Trevor Lawrence was on one in the second half. First of all, and second of all,
I feel like that loss is a Brandon Staley stat. If we're being honest.
And he touched the ball.
They had chances to score in the second half.
But just ignoring all that, like the playoff success, which I think like you have to be on the right team at the right time. Like if they lose that game against the Raiders, that run never happens. And I don't know. I just feel
it's
like
true. It was one play.
Burrow's been to the playoffs twice. Herbert's been to the playoffs once. Like regular season record, Burrow is 33-28-1. Herbert is 36-35. If he wins on Sunday, there's 2 games separating them in the regular season. The big difference is one's had a decent defense to a good defense, a defense that's been able to get them to the Super Bowl, and the other one's had the worst defense in the NFL like every year for the past 3 years up until this year. And look at the records.
Yeah, well, they do have a top 10 defense this year. So yes, this is a game we didn't talk about this specific game yet in our Bro versus Herbert thing. Are the Bengals dead if they lose this game? Do you think the Bengals win this game? This is a game like the Chargers have had the easiest schedule in the NFL. I think it ranks 32nd in DVOA. This should be a game where you are able to like retweet your Justin Herbert is a top 5 MVP thing clip, and he should just go out on national TV and carve up this Bengals defense, correct?
I'm not saying that.
Come on.
It still relies on. We're relying on like Will Dissly third down targets and Greg Roman game plans here. So I don't know. Like I really don't have a good answer for you, like what to expect from this game, because I'm really interested to hear what Diante has to say about Jesse Minter. We haven't seen this defense really tested. We haven't seen this first year defensive coordinator who comes from the Michigan program, which we know produced Mike McDonald, who was like the hottest defensive coach of last year. And he was a defensive coach that really made his name against these Bengals. Like the first time I really noticed him, at least, was that first matchup with the Bengals. And I was like, oh, like they really did some good stuff to confuse this passing game that hadn't been confused up until that point very often. And they're doing a lot of the same stuff. Like they have a deep menu of coverages, a lot of too high. I think they're second in middle of the field open rate. And that's typically the type of defense that gives the Bengals problems. But if this isn't like a high quality defense or a high quality version of that Mike McDonald defense, I think Burrow has the capability to just carve it up.
What do you think, Diante?
You know, I'm with Steven in the fact that, like, I don't really have a great feel. I don't feel like I have my thumb on the pulse of the way this game should go, because coming out of watching the Chargers defense, the thing I walked away from the film thinking is that, like, this is just a deeply unsexy version of playing good defense, right? Like they're second to last in run stuff rate on early downs. And I think they're sandwiched between Carolina and Dallas. So that tells you that they're not resetting the line of scrimmage. And you can see that when you're watching them on film. The thing that they just happen to do better than most teams in the NFL is a strict adherence to, like, no explosives, no matter what. They don't miss tackles. I think they're top 10 in, like, the missed tackle to made tackle ratio in the league so far this year. And keeping that roof over the defense, like Steven is mentioning, has done so much to that. I think this is probably closer to an actualized version of what Brandon Staley always wanted from his defense. It was like, you don't have to get a ton of TFLs. They have a good sack rate, even though I don't think that they're always winning on a down-to-down basis in terms of generating pressure. But because they play with so many soft zone shells and they play very disciplined and their linebacker play has improved a bunch, they're able to take away a lot of those middle of the field and deep inside, between the hash kind of throws that seem to kill Brandon Staley's defenses week over week, especially last season when everything kind of went off the rails. But I think that for them this week, this is a good test to see whether or not, when you're seeing a high level quarterback and a high end receiver, whether or not you can stifle that passing game. I thought they did decently against Arizona a few weeks ago, even though they came out of that game with a loss because they didn't give up much explosiveness. That's what Cincinnati has really been banking on, is the fact that at any point in time, they can get that lightning strike for 30, 40, 50 yards. If they're able to keep Cincinnati from accessing those plays in the drop back game, then that, to me, I think bodes well in terms of talking about how stable Los Angeles' defense will be going down the stretch of the year. And then on the other end, if you are Justin Herbert and you are the Chargers offense, this is exactly the kind of defense you want to see, because it's one that's been up and down all year. Their best performances have been against weaker opponents and weaker offenses defensively. And you should be able to run the ball to set up the play action game. And that's what they've been doing during this hot streak, is getting those deep shots off of play action passes and then popping the one or two explosive runs they need to get them in a striking distance. This should be a good game for Los Angeles. It's just because their schedule, we don't really have a good beat on whether or not this is a team that actually beats good football teams.
Yeah, my worry is like Greg Roman falling into that trap and being like, we can run on this team, so we're going to run on this team, and we're not going to let Justin Herbert be Justin Herbert. The Justin Herbert we've seen over the last month, when they've really let him, out of his cage on first down, especially. Yeah. That's my one concern. And I know, like, Lou Anarumo, I know, like, the defense hasn't looked good at all this year. There's been some bright spots every once in a while. But he's always been good at kind of like enticing opposing coordinators into doing the wrong thing. Yes. With numbers and bodies. And like, he's always had a good handle on Greg Roman's offenses in Baltimore. And I think those offenses had more talent in Baltimore. And I think Lamar Jackson was a more unique challenge than Justin Herbert presents, even though Justin Herbert is like turning into Lamar Jackson over the last couple of weeks with the way he's scrambling and breaking defenders' ankles. So I don't know. I could see this being kind of a trap game for Greg Roman in that offense, and the Bengals having surprise success on the defensive side. So I'm kind of leaning towards the Bengals in this one, even though I think the Chargers have the better quarterback.
Yeah, they just can't. They haven't been able to find defensive backs that they can play. They're just like benching a guy here, rotating guys, bringing Xavier Howard for a tryout this week. It's just like they are desperate there with that secondary. So we'll see what it looks like. It should be a fun game. I do want to see what this Chargers defense, like, are they going to put the clamps on this Bengals offense? Then it adds another degree of credibility because they've played really well, but they've also beaten up on a lot of bad teams. So I do want to see what it looks like against a desperate team with a quarterback who's playing at a very high level. All right, last game we're talking about, Ravens at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mike Tomlin, one of the stars of the season, just feeling himself. Every press conference, he's given some kind of clip that's going viral this week. I think it was about Diante Johnson a little bit. He was asked about Jaden Daniels compared to Lamar Jackson and said, settle down. Mr. Jackson has won a couple MVPs here. So Mike Tomlin has been very fun this season. This is a really weird matchup. I was reading our colleague Anthony DeBundo's betting column on theringer.com, and he wrote, when the Ravens and Steelers have matched up in the Harbaugh and Tomlin era, the underdogs of at least 3 points have been 18, 2, and 3 against the spread. So it's just like every time a team has their back against the wall or is the underdog in this matchup with these two coaches, the underdog usually comes out on top. Steelers are 3-point underdogs against the Ravens. Ruiz, what's the case for me, I was like, all right, I want to pick the Steelers. And I'm like, wait, what's the actual case for the Steelers winning this game and slowing down the Ravens offense?
I think the case is that Lamar Jackson has never beaten the Steelers. He's 0-4 and starts against the Steelers. He's never thrown for more touchdowns than interceptions. His stat line, like based on EPA and success rate and yards per dropback, is basically what Caleb Williams is doing right now. And think about how we're talking about Caleb Williams in those matchups. In those 4 matchups. So I think that's the one concern. And I do think the Steelers defense, how they play defense, they're going to play tight man coverage. They're going to play cover 1. They can stay tight to those Ravens receivers if they want to do their RPO stuff. But I think this is a game where you're going to see the value of having that plan B that we've talked about, that under center run game where for the first time in a couple years, they can kind of punch back at the Steelers. I know we used to talk about this rivalry as kind of like, the gridiron rivalry, the black and blue rivalry, like these hard hitting games. But the Ravens have kind of been a finesse team over the last couple of years. I know Greg Roman did a lot with like heavy bodies and pulling guards, but they were in the gun. They were running option. They weren't getting under center and just running downhill at teams. But this Ravens team can do that. And I think that might help them just play more like a Steelers type of game, which they haven't been able to do the last couple times they've played. And I think Pittsburgh has made them uncomfortable and made them play left-handed. And that's why we've seen some upsets recently in this rivalry.
What do you think, Diante? How do you see this matchup?
To me, this is probably the first game of the Ravens season that I've looked at and said, if they win, this game has to not be about Lamar Jackson. I think that Sunday's matchup is more about Baltimore's receivers and Derrick Henry than it is about Lamar. And I do think, they were absolutely tortured by drops when Lamar started against them last year in week 5. Like, I think it had like 6 or 7 drops in high leverage situations that would have gone a long way towards the Ravens beating the Steelers last season. So to me, I think this is going to be about the wide receivers separating on early downs when they try to get to that play action passing game that we've seen them beat teams up with all season long. Well, this season and last, when they're able to access that. And then if Pittsburgh is going to play more soft zone or try to put a roof over their defense at all, this has got to be a big explosive run from a Derrick Henry or, setting up screen games for a Justice Hill or something like that. I think that they're going to have to find a way to kind of show that they have another gear. We know that they can be explosive in the passing game, whether there's drop back or play action. We know that they have a hammer now in the run game that allows them to do some different things in short yardage situations and on early downs. I think now if they're able to play the way that like the Bucks were playing the first 6 or 7 weeks of the year, where you just get a bunch of guys out in the route and you try to get the ball out quickly, and maybe you get some yak opportunities. And if that's not there, then you're just able to put 2 tight ends on, get your Pat Ricard some snaps in the game, and allow them to just play, more power football. And if that works for them, I would walk away from it pretty impressed. That's not to say that Lamar Jackson can't be the leading reason why they win this game, but I think I want to see it done a little bit differently when they play the Steelers this week.
Yeah, and last year was the only time he's faced them in the last 3 seasons. So there's been weird, injuries and other stuff. They've clinched. So he's only played in 4 of the 10 matchups against the Steelers since he became the starter. When they pressure him, they got to finish, because Lamar Jackson, best EPA per pass play when pressured in the entire NFL. By the way, lowest turnover worthy play percentage in the NFL. The numbers with him this year, you can literally pull up any of the nerdy categories that we all look at every week, and he's top 3 in every single one. This is, I think we've talked about it. There's no kryptonite for this Ravens offense unless they do something to themselves. They should, theoretically, what they've put on film through the first 10 weeks, they should have an answer for pretty much everything you're going to throw at them, and have the ability to pivot from one thing to the other, which is exactly what you want from your offense. So that's been incredible.
The way that he never loses control of the situation this year is just unlike anything I've ever seen. And I think it's just because he has that superpower where I can make a guy miss in a phone booth whenever I want, and I can outrun, I can break anyone's angle. I can outrun any problems that can pop up in the pocket. I haven't seen anything like it. It's almost like he's playing at a different speed and everyone else on the field is going slow motion. I'm not even sure he's run full speed so far this year.
It never looks like it, yeah.
him. We always joke about how he never gets sacked. He takes 1 sack early in the game and they don't touch him for the rest of the game. If the Steelers can't sack him, we've already seen the Chiefs have trouble containing him. If the Steelers defense can't do it, then I don't know what other defense can do it. I'd give up NFL defense, give up on the idea of sacking him.
Yeah, I love the stat that you pulled about not having any turnover worthy plays and the low sack rate when he's being pressured, because I think that we're seeing it manifested differently than in years past, right? It used to be, okay, if I'm getting pressured, I can always just put my foot in the ground and play the way that Jaden Daniels plays right now, right? We're just off of quick twitchiness. I can get away from guys, and now my legs are a weapon in a way that no defense can account for, even if you do have a spy, even if you do have multiple eyes on me because you're playing zone coverage. Some of the stuff he's doing to escape pressure now almost makes me think about all the good Josh Allen plays, where he's just able to kind of shrug away from players, back up in the pocket. I can buy myself some time. I can do the tiptoe thing down the sideline and decide at the last second whether or not I want to throw or run. And I think that element, I think it has, not only does it free up so much for his receivers, I think that it has to give Todd Monken the ultimate confidence that he can call anything. He can be aggressive as a play caller in the drop back game in ways that I thought kind of escaped them last year at times. I thought they kind of got a little bit predictable in the passing game and just working these high lows and quick game types of concepts to try to get the ball into Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman's hands early. I think that now you're seeing them able to push the ball further downfield because they have true faith that not only can Lamar Jackson be his own check down, but that he can extend and allow guys time to get open in ways that they just haven't had available to them at different points in time with this passing game. And that's what really gives him full control over all of his powers, like Steven was saying. It's the fact that he can make a guy miss, and I can still put the ball in the seams with accuracy. I can still find that curl route or that dig route working into the second or third window after I extend. And then and because of that, you have to honor it. And now if I scramble, you get those impactful 3rd and 12s that turn into an 18-yard game for a first down where the guy still goes untouched, even though it seems like he's surrounded by defenders. There's really not much that you can do with him as it is now. Pittsburgh is really well designed. We saw that last week against the Commanders to bother a quarterback like a Lamar Jackson because of how they can get home with 4, because you have a good interior pass rusher in Hayward, and you've got your combo of edge rushers, not only with TJ Watt, but that revolving door that they've had opposite of him with Alex Highsmith dealing with his injuries. I am interested to really see whether or not Lamar Jackson can put all of that on display and get Pittsburgh to play outside of their character and make them play differently and not play so much tight man coverage and really, try to crush the pocket and challenge them in that way. That's the matchup I'm looking at.
I think this is a week where we're going to see why Tomlin was saying slow down with those Jaden Daniels, Lamar Jackson comparisons, which like he shouldn't have to say. Obviously, one's a rookie and the other one is a 2-time MVP, about to be a 3-time MVP if this continues.
Yeah, we just talked about all the different ways the Ravens offense can be efficient and explosive. Other side of the ball, there's one way, and we see it's the same thing every week. At least it's reliable. It's consistent. We know what the Steelers are going to do with Russell Wilson back there. I was actually looking at some of the numbers, and if you just look at passing success rate, Wilson and Justin Fields, it's almost identical, their performance in this offense. The difference, of course, has been the explosive plays. Russell Wilson's throwing it downfield more. He's connecting more downfield, and now he goes up against the Ravens defense that is allowing an explosive pass play on 17% of the opponent's dropbacks, which is the worst mark in the NFL. It's funny when you look at the Ravens defense, their run defense has been very good. It's really all about kind of that explosive passing game. So we know what the Steelers want to do. We know what the Ravens' weakness is. Can the Steelers get it done in this game offensively, make enough plays to stay in it in the fourth quarter?
The Steelers want to make this a George Pickens versus Brandon Stevens type of game. And
right.
If that happens, Pittsburgh has a chance.
Yeah.
We've seen them upset this team in the past.
Yeah, Pittsburgh is an analyst's nightmare because the only thing I can really say is moonball go up, moonball go down. Right. Sometimes it's completed, sometimes it's not.
There's going to be a weird special teams play in there. There's going to be a weird, was that a fumble or not a fumble for the Ravens? And it gets, and Tomlin throws the flag and stuff like that. Yes, there's going to be some weirdness here. But I will say this about the Steelers, second hardest remaining schedule in the NFL. So if you look at the FanDuel odds right now, even though the Steelers are 7-2 and the Ravens are 7-3, the odds are minus 260 for the Ravens. That's a 72% chance to win the AFC North. So obviously those numbers flip if the Steelers win this game. But if the Steelers lose this game, it might get a little bit interesting for them down the stretch. All right, take one more break. We come back. We will go over our picks for Week 11. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show, the pick segment. Reminder, we make 3 picks every week, minus 120 or better odds. Whoever is in last place gets assigned the slop game of the week. That was me last week, just chilling at 9:30 in the morning, watching a little Bryce Young, Daniel Jones. What could be better? And they have to talk about that game on the Sunday night show. So I was 1-2 last week. Ruiz was 2-1. This heater Ruiz is on, Diante. What can we do we need to come up with some way to jinx him. I'm trying to gas him up so much that it has the reverse effect, and it's still not working.
I'm not taking the bait. I'm a humble analyst. I'm going to go 0-3 this week. My picks are all bad. I can feel it coming. 0-3.
Yeah,
I don't like that.
Okay. Yeah. That is a definitionally humble bragging. Like, get this shit out of here. If anybody should be upset, in spite of some of your misfortunes so far this year, if anybody should be upset for this week specifically, it should be me because of the manner in which I went 0-3. Yeah. That Jalen Hurts tap pass to Anais Smith is still playing in my mind.
Yeah, Diante went 0-3, so he gets the slop game of the week. He had the Jalen Hurts over and missed it by, was it 1 yard, 1.5 yard? What was it? Something like that.
Half yard.
Half a yard.
It was
oh my God.
202.5, and he finished at exactly 200.
See, I thought it was burned badly because I missed the A-chain over on 5.5 receptions. He had 5, but no, that's way worse. I wouldn't even have shown up for the recording, to be honest.
You know what's the worst part about it is that they were already up by so many scores. I had assumed that they just weren't going to pass anymore. Yeah. I thought he was going to get benched, so I had made my peace with it. And then I saw the tap pass, and I was like, oh, wait, I've got life just for Anais Smith to run himself sideways and out of bounds for a 1 yard gain.
But let's be honest, those shouldn't count as passing yards.
Oh, 1,000%.
I'm going to soft launch a take. I don't think any throw behind the line of scrimmage should be considered a pass. I think it should be a run.
I'm in. I agree.
Right, nice. You're talking to a defensive coordinator here. You're getting no argument out of me.
Yeah.
Would you rather have, but I don't know, because you don't want to see that run number go up, right? I feel like the defensive coordinators are more sensitive about the yards per carry number.
Your reputation's on the line if you can't stop the run.
You don't want to be a Brandon Staley defensive coordinator now.
No, I like that because I'm a nerd enough to be able to, kind of bucket the numbers and be like, hey, you're gaining yards by running away from all of our linemen. What does that say about you, offensive coordinator?
If I was a high school player,
come in here and fight me like a man.
If I was a high school player and you brought up success rate to me, I would quit the team. So I would transfer. I would enter the transfer portal.
All right. So Diante 0-3. We are going to give him Ruiz the Browns and the Saints.
Ooh.
He gets another Merry Christmas to Diante. What's his actual name? Rizzy? Darren Rizzy?
Yeah, Darren Rizzy.
Will Darren Rizzy clog the toilet before this one or not? The most anticipated, we talked about all the matchups, but let's be honest, the most anticipated moment of the week is, does Rizzy clog the toilet for the second week in a row, leading to a Saints win?
Have you seen that guy? He's clogging that toilet. He's clogged it every week, every day of the week so far this week.
All right. I'm going to leave that one alone. On the season, again, Ruiz, just an absurd record. 21-9 on the season. Diante, respectable 15-15. Me with a unrespectable 13-17. 4 games under 500 on the season. All right, I'm going to take control. I'm not going to let you guys steal one of my great picks, because that's what happens.
That's part of the problem.
Yeah, that's been part of the problem. So I'm going to stick with Merry Christmas, and I'm going to go to that game. This is true degenerate behavior for me to make this my first pick. Nick Chubb over 15.5 rushing attempts. So again, this is from the slop game. Browns against the Saints. Saints are 31st in DVOA against the run. Jameis is going to be a little amped up to face his former team. Stefanski's going to say, settle down. We're going to run the ball with Nick Chubb, who hasn't had monster numbers so far, but he has gotten those carries. So Saints gave up 468 yards to the Falcons last week. Browns are coming off the bye. Come on, Stefanski. Just give Nick Chubb the football. Nick Chubb over 15.5 rushing attempts. We really don't have to talk anymore about this game unless you want to.
No, I got nothing to add. I'm excited for the Jameis revenge game, but I don't want to watch 1 second of this game.
All right, Diante, you go second because we don't want Ruiz stealing our picks. He's going to have to go elsewhere.
You guys are conspiring against me.
Yeah, that's right. Diante, what do you got?
No, this one's an easy one. I'm going with Anthony Richardson over 38.5 rushing yards, which is minus 114. I think the easiest way for him to solve some of his problems, instead of trying to push the ball down the field or trying to work through progressions with how aggressive they've treated the drop back passing game, the best solution for his problems is just going to be to put his foot in the ground and go get easy yardage. I think that this Jets pass rush is going to be a good one for him to try to escape and get easy yardage against. And I think that's probably going to be part of the game plan. Steven obviously has been talking about it for a while in terms of Indianapolis not being viable in the running game when he's not there for them. And I think having him back, I expect to see a lot of that 12 personnel, shotgun, zone read, design run game start to come back into the fold for this offense. And this should be a good week for it. So I do expect Anthony Richardson. I don't know what the passing to be like, but I think that he'll have a pretty strong day on the ground.
Yeah, I was trying to find an angle for this game, but I couldn't figure one out. I like this one, though. I think that's going to be the game plan. I think Shane Steichen's going to be like, oh, I got my run game back. I'm going to spam it all game long, and I'm not going to give Anthony Richardson a chance to embarrass himself or the team again this week.
Listen, this is where Diante gets the time difference bump, because I'm looking at this, about 3 hours ago, trying to get my picks ready. No rushing yards are up there. I'm saying, come on, give me something with the Colts run game against this Jets run defense that has been garbanzo beans. And like you said, like Anthony Richardson's in there, he's going to be in playmaking mode. So I love this one, Diante. You get the West Coast time. You can look at it a little bit. You looked at it a little bit later in the day than I did, and you get the pick there.
Excuses. Excuses.
This is only the beginning for me. I mean, this is if my record continues to be this bad, wait till you see. I'll bring the kids into it. I'll have no shame with the type of excuses you'll start hearing in the weeks ahead. All right. I like that one a lot, though. Richardson over rushing yards. I like the over rushing attempts, too. It just had 7.5. I think he's going to have a nice day on the ground. All right, Ruiz, what do you got?
All right, my first pick is going to come from the 49ers Seahawks game. And this pick for me is just, I want to see something. I want to see something from Mike McDonald. I want to see him scheme up something. I'm going to take the 49ers minus 6.5. They've won 6 straight in a row against Seattle. The games haven't been competitive. The first game, San Francisco was moving the ball up and down the field. I think with CMC back, his role should expand. We should see them lean more into that home base we've been talking about for Shannon, that home base offense. And that style of offense has just given the Seahawks scheme fits all year long, and I would expect that to happen. I'm expecting another uncompetitive 49ers win over the Seahawks.
So this would kind of be it. I was looking at this game early and I'm like, this would kind of be a bummer for the Seahawks if they just get crushed in this game and their season's over. I know going into the season, we were kind of like they could be a frisky team. Maybe, they get DK Metcalf in here. Do you think, I know you said you want to see something, like does McDonald have something up his sleeve coming off a bye? Can he do anything or is it just the personnel?
I think the personnel advantage is so steep that even if he has a game plan, it won't matter. And I've lost all faith in Ryan Grubb. Like I forget he could just skip Fraud Watch and just go back to go back to college.
Okay. All right, that sounds like if they stink for this game, that's going to be a big topic on Sunday night. Yeah, the Seahawks are 4-5, fourth hardest remaining schedule here. It's so funny. You look at all their splits, they're mediocre in everything. Just offense, defense, run defense, pass defense, pass offense, run, everything they rank between like 14th and 20th in the NFL here. I'm leaving a little bit of hope that they can maybe do something in this game and be a little frisky. It might be hope more than reason, though. You are?
No,
okay.
So am I. The pick I have from this game was going over 48.5 total points because I do think that there's a little bit more life left in the Seattle offense, and really probably more just a credit to Geno Smith and what I think he can do with a fully healthy DK Metcalf against a defense that is going to play a lot of soft zone looks, which is what they've liked to attack. When this offense was working really well early in the season, that was a hallmark of what they were doing schematically, is getting him those 7 and 9 step drop back concepts where you're really pushing the ball deep on posts and those one-on-one opportunities if you're getting those quarters types of looks. So I do think that he'll get those chances. It's really just a matter of keeping him upright long enough to be able to attack him and take advantage, and then finding literally anything in the running game to try to supplement what else is happening with the rest of this offense. So if they can just land on something that's semi-competitive in the run game and on early downs, I do think that this offense can get squeezed just enough points to keep it interesting.
Yeah, Nick Bosa has a hip injury too, so I think his status is in question for this game. Sorry, Ruiz, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say that's kind of been the problem in past matchups between these teams, is they haven't been able to protect Geno Smith. They kind of get behind early, and it's just a slippery slope. And then by the fourth quarter, the 49ers make one or two plays on offense, and the game has been out of reach. And I think you can see a similar situation here.
Yeah, 49ers, 6.5 point favorites. Of course, they crushed the Seahawks, as we mentioned earlier this season. All right, I am going to Foxborough for my second pick. The Los Angeles Rams taking on the New England Patriots. I'm going Puka Nacua over 68.5 receiving yards. Rams are kind of in desperation mode a little bit after that loss Monday night. I think all three of us at various times this year were like, don't sleep on the Rams. Hey, I kind of like the Rams. And then they get everyone back healthy and they lose a big game there. They get Jonah Jackson back healthy, but remember in the offseason, they signed him as a guard. Then they moved him to center. Now he plays center. And those were like some big miscues in that game where he had the high snap. They had some other stuff up front that wasn't buttoned up. And it's part of the reason they don't score a touchdown against that Miami Dolphins team. Now, they still kind of move the ball if you look at success rate and that kind of thing. I don't think the offense is broken. So you go up against this Patriots defense, which I don't think is very good. Maybe they're improving a little bit. We'll see. I'm not really sure I'm buying that. But Puka Nacua was targeted 14 times last week in that game against the Miami Dolphins. I thought he looked pretty good. 9 catches for 98 yards. So I think he'll get a lot of work in this game. Puka Nacua over 68.5 receiving yards. Ruiz, how are you feeling about this Rams team as they go to Foxborough?
Yeah, I have the same concerns as you. And I think like when they kind of fall into this kind of rut on offense, their solution is usually let's just, give the ball to Matthew Stafford. And Matthew Stafford's solution is usually let's give the ball to Puka Nacua. At least it has been over the last year since he's kind of emerged as his number one target over Cooper Kupp. So yeah, I like this bet. And I do think the Rams are going to bounce back. I think people are a little high on the Patriots after they kind of dismantled the Bears last week, but there's still problems on that offense. And I think the Bears' offensive problems were more of the driver of that result than the Patriots' improvement. I think they're a decent defense. I just don't think they're one that's going to stifle a bunch of teams in a row.
Drake May, I was looking, is I think 18th in drop back success rate, which if you're like 18th for a rookie who's just in there with that group is really, really, really good. And like I was sort of, my initial impression was of him was like, all right, there's going to be these high highs, but and he is throwing a bunch of like, turnover worthy plays, but still success rate shows like down to down. How often are you producing a positive play? That's a nice outcome for Drake May. I kind of understand, as much as I want to say settle down Patriots fans, that's kind of in my nature over the last 2 decades here. I kind of see, I can totally see why you would be excited about that guy.
No, I'm with you on that. My last pick is actually for Drake May in this game, and it's going over 209.5 passing yards. And a lot of this has just come from watching the last 2 weeks and what's been a steady ascension with his comfort in the offense, with his aggression being paid off with good plays outside of that game-ending interception against Tennessee in overtime. And I think last week what you saw was a quarterback who's starting to really kind of understand how he can use his athleticism to get out of negative situations. Yep. The fact that he was able to avoid sacks and avoid negative plays. We didn't see him put the ball in harm's way very often against a Chicago team that really kind of forced him to sit in the pocket and be a playmaker, or to extend if he wasn't going to be in the pocket because of all the zone looks and the tight matchy coverage that they were throwing at New England. I really like what I've seen over the last couple of weeks. And I think that this Rams defense, if you look at what Miami was able to do, which is basically operate in rhythm in the passing game outside of the turnovers, right? Some of the just ridiculous 2 and negative plays that they were getting. If Drake May can just be smart about knowing where Jared Verse is at and not stepping into, interior pressure from a Braden Fisk, I think that this is an opportunity for him to really kind of plant his flag as the kind of quarterback that he can be, because you're starting to see little inklings of the kind of ceiling raising quarterback that he can be at his best over the last few weeks.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the rookie quarterbacks have been really leaning on their legs to avoid those negative plays, except for Caleb Williams, ironically. He's the one that's getting criticized for kind of being
the legs guy.
And he's been criticized for being a runaround guy, but like 32 of his 38 sacks have happened in the pocket. And his average time to scramble, I was writing about him, so I looked up all these stats, is 6.44 seconds. Like, I think Caleb needs to take a cue from these other rookie quarterbacks, including Drake May, and just scramble. Just
get
run.
Out of there.
Yeah.
Get the hell out of there.
Yeah, that's actually my last pick. We haven't talked about that game. This is a very interesting game. Chicago Bears host the Green Bay Packers. The Bears are just a team in disarray, honestly.
Yeah, you want to talk about desperation.
Yeah, desperation, bad vibes. Like, it's just that, usually I guess this time of year, some type a team like this emerges, but it just feels kind of like a snowball effect, and they've got no way to stop any of this. So they fire one offensive coordinator. They bring in Thomas Brown, gets promoted to be the OC. Before I get to my pick, I mean, do you think that, I was trying to think like what's going to be different about this off? Do you think any of the messaging is at least like Caleb, like just let your talent show. Don't worry about being perfect. Diante, Ruiz and I talked about this on the midweek show that like his turnover worthy plays are way down, but we were like, I don't know that that's a great thing, because he looks like a guy who's afraid to make a mistake, and he's so talented. He's not getting out of the pocket. He's standing in there. He's taking sacks. I mean, do you expect us to see any kind of different version from Caleb Williams this week?
I think if this offense was being taken over by a quarterback's guy who had a demonstrated history of cutting his guys loose and allowing them to go be playmakers, I would feel a little bit differently about it. I just didn't see any of that in Carolina last year when Thomas Brown took over as an offensive play caller. And obviously there's too late in the year to try to take on any different type of personality as an offense, right? You've kind of got what you've got. I do think if there's anything that Thomas Brown can bring to the situation, it's telling Caleb Williams, hey, we're just going to take as much off your plate as possible as we can. I think that they've done a decent job in the spread running game, at least, of trying to find opportunities for DeAndre Swift to get some easy yardage on early downs. I think that leaning into that would be smart. I've noted this on power rankings. I know Steven's been talking about this, and so have you throughout the year, just like using Caleb Williams' athleticism and just the threat of him as a runner at times to force defenses to honor what you could do in the running game. I think that would add value. And then I think that, and I mentioned this earlier with Baltimore, take a page out of Tampa Bay's playbook. instead of using Keenan Allen on these sail routes 12 to 15 yards down the field, let's maybe force feed DJ Moore on screens, on these swing passes, on jet sweeps. Let him be a yak guy and see if you can get Rome Odunze maybe a handful of times to get these one-on-one looks out on the perimeter and see if he can come down with something. I think that they have just had such a boilerplate kind of old school West Coast offense to their approach. I think if they just kind of pare some things down even more maybe and just say, hey, your touches are going to be here if you're DJ Moore, your touches are going to be here if you're Rome Odunze, and for Caleb Williams, take a look at the big shot, take a look at the check down, and if neither are there, just go. We're not going to ask you to be the pure progression guy. We need to simplify some things, and I hope that they're able to accomplish that because this is a team that's in complete disarray. And not only this week, but if you look at the rest of the schedule, there's an opportunity for them to go 0 for 8, basically coming down the stretch.
Hardest in the NFL, hardest remaining schedule in the NFL there. So yeah, my pick for this game, I'm just going to go. I'm debating between Caleb Williams under 190.5 passing yards, but I'm just going to go Packers minus 5.5. I just feel like they're the better team. I think they have a chance to go on a run here. And until the Bears show me that they can kind of stop the bleeding and have some answers here where they're not just grasping at straws, I'm not going to trust their offense to do anything. So I don't know that the Packers necessarily have to put up like 30 on offense to cover this number. It could be an ugly game. It could be a 2013 type game, 2014 type game. But I do think the Packers are a significantly better team. I think they're going to be able to run the football, and that Bears offense last week looked to me like one of the most incompetent units in the NFL. So that's my last one. Packers minus 5.5.
Yeah, I don't think I don't expect any changes for the Bears offense, like any significant changes. Like Matt Eberflus said that he made the point Diante made. We're too deep into the season to make changes to the offense. We're going to run the same offense. It's just a different coordinator. His hope is that they get more creativity within the scheme, which is a very low bar if you've watched Chicago's offense. And the other thing he said is we're trying to get people in open positions, which I think anyone who's watched the tape will agree with. They need to create separation, especially against man coverage. It's a good idea.
I'll give him credit for that.
But the problem
guys open. What a concept.
What a concept in the passing game.
I love these coaches.
But the reason why I don't really have faith in Thomas Brown, like another McVay Rams guy turning it around, is they just don't have the personnel to run that type of offense. They don't have receivers who block. They have receivers who win on the perimeter and who win underneath and win quick. They have the receivers to run like a spread run game. And if you look at the numbers, when they get into spread formations, when they run RPOs, they're like a top 10 run team. When they run into a light box, they have one of the highest success rates in the league. When they go under center and try to run with 3 receivers on the field, like the Rams used to do with Cooper Kupp and disgusting. Robert Woods, it doesn't work. The running backs don't block. They're not getting any explosive plays. And I think running our perimeter blocking is what creates those explosive plays in the run game, and they're just not getting it. So I don't know how Thomas Brown fixes that. I don't think Sean McVay himself could come in here and fix this offense.
Listen, Caleb Williams, take this piece of advice. You've probably got a little bit of political currency in that building right now after they just released the offensive coordinator. You need to make sure that you talk to your GM and say, hey, we saw the other two of the 4 starting rookie quarterbacks this year, and we got our butts kicked offensively because we didn't do what our opponents were doing with their rookie quarterbacks. Give me some guys that are going to give me some easy buttons offensively. I think that bringing in Shane Waldron, for as hopeful as it was to try to build that kind of McVay-esque skeleton of an offense around him, clearly is not a fit for his skill set and not a fit for what they have offensively, like Steven was saying. Go get a spread guy. It doesn't have to be as extreme as Cliff Kingsbury, but go find, your 2013, 2014, 2013 to 2018 version of like the Andy Reid, Doug Peterson, Frank Reich-ish offense.
Just not Doug Peterson, though. Not Doug Peterson.
Right. I paused because I knew I couldn't say Andy Reid and didn't want to say Doug Peterson. And I guess Frank Reich probably isn't the answer.
Shane Steichen's out there. Shane Steichen can be that guy.
So yeah, I just think that they've got to come back to the table, I think, and reevaluate what they wish their young quarterback would be and maybe ground themselves in the reality of what works best for who he is today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right. Ruiz, did we get your third one or no?
No, we need 2 picks from me.
Oh, you need 2? Sorry. We were in that mode of, hey, you're talking about this game, I'm going to get to mine type thing. So I've given all 3 of mine. Diante, do you still have one left or no? Or are you done? It's okay. Ruiz, you do yours, and then we'll get to.
I'm done. Sorry about that.
You got to save the premium picks for last.
That's right.
Keep
so you can't. All right.
Engaged,
so we can use the excuse that you stole ours this week. So go ahead.
I'm going Falcons under 21.5 points. I just think this is a bad matchup for Kirk Cousins. When you have a stationary target in the pocket going up against a Vance Joseph defense, and I think they're going to be able to really attack that run game, which has been so successful for Atlanta. And they don't run like a lot of play action. They're still not running a lot of play action. They're doing a lot of their run game out of pistol, and for whatever reason, they're not running play action out of the pistol looks. So I think it's going to be an easier matchup for Denver than it looks on paper. And then my other one is Josh Allen over 33.5 rush yards. I think you're going to sense the desperation in Buffalo and how they use Allen, how they call plays, and how Allen runs, like in and out of structure. I think this is one of those games where he's going to want to win this football game. He's going to want to prove that he's the best quarterback in the NFL, and he's going to do whatever it takes. And I think he's going to have success doing it. He's had over 4 scrambles in the last 3 games. I think if you get up to 5, including design rushes, I think 33 is easy.
I feel like every Mahomes, Lamar, Allen, every time 2 of those guys played each other for the next 10 years, if you just took the over on rushing yards for each of the quarterbacks, 10 years, it's not quite long-term investing here. We're not getting that deep, but I think you would come out on top because yes, it feels like when they play each other and they sort of sense it's a big moment or a big game that they start scrambling there. We see that Falcons-Broncos game the same way, Ruiz. I was looking at it, kind of surprised me. Cousins is 25th in success rate against the blitz this year, which sort of surprised me because he killed Todd Bowles in those 2 games, but overall 25th. Broncos are the most blitz happy defense in the NFL. They've obviously got a shutdown corner, and I think Denver's offense has been playing well. I'm not saying they've been playing great, but I see definite improvement from them in recent weeks. I like the Broncos in that game, 2.5 point favorites. That was actually one of the ones I was debating between for my last pick there against the Falcons.
You becoming a Bo Nix guy?
Listen, you're not going to every 2 weeks I get a new label, and then I still turn the mic off and I go, how did that happen? Yeah, I don't know. Normally I'm the person doing this to other people. I don't like being on this end of it. Maybe the last 8 weeks I got to be more prepared.
I'm going to pawn Caleb off on you in a couple weeks.
That is not Caleb guy. I'm on record with that one there. All right, so let's go over our picks here real quick. My 3 are going to be Nick Chubb over 15.5 rushing attempts, Puka Nacua over 68.5 receiving yards, and then I've got the Packers minus 5.5 in Chicago. Ruiz, what do you got?
I got San Francisco minus 6.5 against Seattle, the Falcons under 21.5 points, and Josh Allen over 33.5 rush yards.
Diante?
And then for me, I've got Drake May going over 209.5 passing yards. I've got the Seattle-San Francisco game going over 48.5 points, and Anthony Richardson over 38.5 rushing yards.
I like it. There you go. Those are the picks for week 11. Will it be business as usual? Ruiz 2-1 or 3-0? Me not able to buy a bucket. Diante up and down. Will it be a 3-0 week for Diante or no 0-3 week for Diante? Yeah, there's only 2 modes. There's no in between.
Brian Flores, Vance Joseph of picks. We're either getting home with everybody or you're going to blow me up on the back end.
0 or rush 3. That's all Diante's doing with his picks all season long. All right, we'll be keeping an eye on those. We'll be back with you Sunday night, recapping Bengals-Chargers, Chiefs, Bills, Ravens, Steelers, whatever other action we see on Sunday. Thank you to Diante Lee and Steven Ruiz. Thank you to Christopher Sutton for producing. Daniel Comer assisting us, as always, an additional production supervision by Conor Nevins and Arjuna Ramgopal. I'm Sheil Kapadia. We will talk to you Sunday night on the Ringer NFL Show.